Hello and welcome to this tutorial by app.tuco.ai on how you can automate sending iMessages, replying to these iMessages, to set up appointments using app.tuco.ai and N8N, right? So app.tuco.ai is a tool that helps you automate iMessage. We integrate with N8N, Go High Level, HubSpot, Salesforce, BoostCenter, any sort of CRM. But if you want to build your own workflows, this is a great way to get started using app.tuco.ai. All right, so I want to get started with a bunch of terms that I'm going to be using, which is like you have these tools like N8N, Make.com, and Zapier. And what they are they're basically workflows. Now, what is a workflow? A workflow is a series of steps that are comprised of nodes. So think of each node as something that's taking an input and then processing it and giving out an output, right? So a workflow is a series of steps, and each node takes in an input, gives out an output. It's an easy way to automate it so that every time a lead comes in, send them this text, and then send them this text, and do these series of steps in this order. And Zapier and N8N and Make.com make you easier to kind of like do this so that every time a lead comes in, you want to send them a text, right? I also want to touch upon two things that I often get asked, which is like, hey, what is a webhook? Think of a webhook as basically how apps talk to each other. So let's say you have a lead that comes in from Facebook, and then you got to send that to Tuco, and then now you want to send a WhatsApp notification or an email. Now, how are these apps supposed to talk to each other? Well, they use a technology called webhooks, right? Great. So apart from that, you also need to know what an API key is. An API key simply is like a password. So let's say 500 people are using Tuco at the same time. How are we supposed to know who sent us that request? That's what an API key does. It's similar to a password, right? And then you also need to know what a workspace is. So this is the Tuco.ai interface. That's app.tuco.ai. app.tuco.ai, and in here you can basically have multiple clients. So if you're an agency, you want to manage multiple workspaces, and then each workspace can also have multiple phones, because keep in mind, iMessage lets you do only like 50 new contacts a day. It's changing day by day, right? So you can have multiple phone lines under one client or one workspace, and then you can also be a part of multiple workspaces. Each API key or each password is restricted to one workspace. So you want to make sure you have an individual API key for each of your clients, right? And then the last thing probably for this tutorial that you would need to know as a prerequisite is something called the E.164 format. It's pretty simple. So let's say you have a phone number, but it has only 10 digits and doesn't have +1. We won't know which country code, because it could be +1, it could be +44. We want to know which country. So you got to pass that in. And keep in mind, it's very easy to follow along. These are just like common phrases that would be using throughout this video, and it's in your best interest to know what these things mean. All right, perfect. So you can skip this part if you're like an expert in all these things. So first I'm going to go into tuco.ai/templates/N8N automation. N8N-iMessage-automation. So you're going to find this link in the description, and then I'll also include the E164 validator, so that you know the data that's coming through has a valid phone number that you can send into Tuco. Perfect. So right now we have a good starter template to help you get started. You're just going to click on that, and it's going to download it in something called a JSON. And you got to know what a JSON is. A JSON is basically you want to send structured information between apps. You remember I told you about webhooks, so you want to send structured information between two apps, and you do that using something like JSON. So let's say you want to send me your first name. You use these curly brackets, you use these quotes, and then you use colon, and you use like quotes, and then you give the answer. Just think of them as question, answer sort of situation. Great. So now I'm going to come into N8N. You can use a self-hosted N8N. You can use a cloud version, doesn't really matter. What you got to do is, right now in this interface, keep in mind I'm recording this on 26th of July 2026, so things might change, but you're going to shop around for these three dots and for a situation where it says import from file. And you want to download the JSON that's on the website, that's tuco.ai/templates/N8N iMessage automation, and import that JSON file here. Whoa, that's a lot of nodes. So each node, if you remember, takes in a pair of information, processes it, and passes it to the next node. So we're going to go through it. It's going to be easy. You don't have to get afraid by the number of nodes here. So I'm just going to walk you through the first sequence, which is like when I want to send, let's say, a specific iMessage, right? So what I'm going to do here is a webhook. So if you remember, webhooks are how apps communicate, right? So you got to have an entry point to a workflow where it's like, hey, I have a Facebook lead that filled out a form, or this person came into my website and I'm sending that information to N8N, and that's what a webhook is. It's going to have a method, HTTP method. You're probably going to use something called post so that you can include the JSON. GET requests don't include that. And then you want to make sure, I hate this annoying thing about N8N. There's one test URL and then there's one production URL. So if you're giving this webhook to someone else, you want to make sure you use the production URL. But it doesn't have to start from a webhook. It could start from, let's say you click on the plus icon here and you have a Facebook trigger of someone filling out a particular form, right? Great. So for now, I'm going to use this webhook and I'm going to send information to this webhook. Now, what information am I going to send? Well, if you look at this side, I have the body, remember, JSON with the curly brackets and the quotes. I have the lead's name, and then I have the phone in the E.164 format. Perfect. Now I want to save that lead to Tuco and I want to send them a bunch of iMessages, right? That's what we're trying to do. All right, perfect. So I'm then going to click on this pencil icon, and this is something that you need to know about N8N, which is you can basically map so that it's easier for you to access these variables. So what is a variable? It's like each node can have XYZ stuff, and you got to map it so that, like, let's say lead 1 comes in, you got to know their phone number for that particular workflow. Lead 2 comes in, the phone number is automatically going to get replaced. Those are these green things here, right? So what I'm going to do is I want to store the message I want to send these leads. I want to store the first name, the last name, the email, and the phone in case you have it. You don't really need a lot of these things. Well, let's keep it simple for now. Let's just keep the first name, the last name, and the phone number. Great. So what I'm going to do is on the left hand side, you're going to see the webhook. So remember, nodes spit out items. They're outputting stuff, right? So here in my webhook, I have the phone number that's in the E.164 format. I'm going to drag it from this side. I'm holding my mouse and I'm dragging it here. All right, perfect. So, and then let's say I have the last name here that's already filled. And then let's say I have the first name here that's already filled. Great. So when you execute it, it's taking in a bunch of stuff and spitting it out. Now it's just saying that there are a lot of information that came in as a part of this. We don't need that. We just need the first name, the last name, the phone number. That's all you need for Tuco to send a text. Great. So now I have that mapped. I got to check if it's a valid phone number, because you remember, we only accept E.164 format. So I'm going to run this and I'm going to drag. So now you see 2 inputs. In the first step, we saw 1 input. Now we're seeing 2 inputs. If I'm just like coming out, this is input 1, this is input 2, and then I am dragging this here. And I'm going to click on execute step, and it's going to tell me whether or not it's a valid phone number, because it says if it's a valid phone number, it's going to go into the true branch, right? The true branch. So if I zoom in here, you see a true branch and a false branch. So if someone signed up with a junk phone number, you don't actually need to message them, right? Great. Perfect. So now I gotta check whether or not that is an iPhone, because like keep in mind, Tuco for now sends only iMessages. So you might have something called a fallback when they don't have an iMessage, which will go into the false branch inside of has iMessage. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Right now, I have a lead that came in. I saved their, think of this as this pencil icon as saving the lead's information. And I'm saving that this guy's first name is BG, last name is Tuco, and this is his phone number. Great. Now, I also verified if there's a true, valid phone number. Now, I want to check whether or not he has an iPhone. So it's going to automatically pre-fill this as a part of your template, so you don't have to do a lot. But one thing you do have to do is, you remember when I began this video, I basically told you your API key is your password. So you need an API key. How do you get a Tuco API key? Well, you go into app.tuco.ai. And once you go there, you gotta go into integrations. On the left-hand side, you can scroll. Are you able to see my screen? Like, you'll scroll, click on integrations, API keys. Inside of integrations, there's this tab. And I'm going to click on create API key. I'm going to name this N8N, right? I'm going to click on create. You're going to see this only once, so you got to save this. Save this in your password manager, because this needs to be secure. So I can copy this using this clipboard icon. All right, perfect. It's copied to my clipboard. I'm going to go back here. In the authentication, I'm going to use generic credential type. I'm going to use bearer auth, and then I'm going to create a new credential. So you can name stuff in N8N by just like clicking on this. So right next to the globe icon, I'm clicking on this. I'm going to say Tuco demo N8N key. And then all Tuco API keys would start with Tuco _. You're going to paste that, whatever you copied here, paste that in. Click on save. All right, so now you scroll down, you got to give it the address. So Tuco needs to check whether or not this phone number is valid. Now, where do we get the phone number? Like I said, each node gives out an output item that I drag it from there and put it here. All right, perfect. So it's already dragged in. I'm going to click on execute step. Let it execute. And then, yeah, it basically says available is true. Keep in mind, each phone line, so again, just a revision, each workspace can have multiple phones, because each phone can only do 15 messages a day. So if you have multiple phone lines, you can do that using this. And you're basically using each phone line can check only if 70 numbers are valid each day. So if you wanted more capacity, you got to get more phones, right? So right now I'm just like checking for one, so I should be good. And I dragged the phone number from here to here, and I checked after passing the API key. I checked if this address is valid. Now, if you get some other error here that says unauthorized or 401, it means that your API key is invalid, or you misdid any of these steps, right? So you got to select generic credential type, bearer auth, and then give the API key that you copied from the integrations page into here. Perfect. So now it says available is true. What does that mean? It just means that this guy has an iPhone. How do I know that? Well, I have that phone and it's an iPhone. Great. So again, first we checked if it's a valid phone number. Now we're checking whether or not it has an iMessage. So again, like, do you see the true branch and then the false branch? So if they have a valid iMessage, I want to save them inside of Tuco. And for that, I'm going to use the create lead node that I have here. Each node is basically just, doing this basic thing, which is an API call, right? Again, history lesson. An API call is basically a webhook. It's the same. It's how apps talk to each other. So right now, N8N is talking to Tuco. I have the exact same authentication type, which is generic credential type, the post URL, remember, we want to send information in JSON, so I'm not going to use the get method. I'm going to use the post method this time. I'm going to fill in app.tuco.ai/API/leads. You don't need to know this because it's going to be pre-filled from the template. And sounds good. So here's the JSON body. Now, a couple of things about N8N again. So you're going to see two things here, fix it and expression. So what is expression? Fix it is basically, I want to do the same thing every time this workflow runs. That's fix it. Expression is something like, hey, if lead 1 comes in, then do his stuff. If lead 2 comes in, do his stuff. That's expression. So you're going to click on expression, and then you're going to see this small rectangle with an upper arrow, and that's just like to make it full screen. I'm going to click on that, and here you're basically going to see a JSON where the first name is filled in from the previous step. So it's going to come in from the previous step, and I don't want the email. So whenever you're removing stuff, or if you can't like understand how this thing is, you can just go to Google and you can say JSON formatter, right? Click on that, click on this, click on process. So now you're basically saying that, hey, take this guy's first name from this node, take this guy's last name from this node, and take this guy's email from this node. We don't have that, and that's why this thing is red. If that thing is red, it means that it's not there. So I'm going to remove that. You got to be careful when you remove that because JSON has a syntax. If you're removing it, you got to remove it along the codes. So I'm clicking and dragging my mouse because I don't need that, and I'm taking the comma off because it's in the middle, right? So I'm going to make it a bit more beautiful. Let me copy it from here. All right, so I have the first name here. I don't have the email, so I'm going to remove this. And then I don't have the company name, so I'm going to remove that. And then I don't have any custom fields for this specific guy, so I'm going to remove that. And I'm still going to put that into JSON validator. And I'm going to click on process. It says it's valid. So you got to communicate using JSON, and that JSON needs to be valid. Great. All right, you got to give a source, but I mean, it's optional, so I'm going to remove that. This is the syntax. Again, I'm checking if there's a valid JSON. All right, it's a valid JSON. This is just a bit more beautiful, so I'm going to copy paste that here. And here, the stuff in green gets automatically replaced. Remember, we got to run this for every new lead that's coming in, and that needs to be dynamic. Anything that's green is dynamic in N8N. So I like what I see here. I'm going to try to add this to Tuco, so I'm going to click on execute step, this orange button up here, and it's going to run, right? If you get errors here, again, like here, it's not an error. It's basically saying, hey, I already exist inside of the CRM. So I'm trying to save this inside of Tuco. So if I go to app.tuco.ai again, and on the left-hand side, the sidebar is going to have overview and then leads. I'm going to click on leads, and sure enough, if I type my phone number, it's already there. So every lead basically has something called an ID, right? And that's why it's basically saying that, hey, you already have this lead, and this is the lead ID. So think of it as a way to locate a unique contact, right? We're going to need that. Now, one of the cool things about N8N is every time you're running a new step, you want to, like, it's a workflow, right? So all the other previous nodes need to execute. But let's say I am on step 5 and I don't want to rerun all the other steps each time I do it. So to solve for that problem, while I'm testing it, I can do something called a pin. And that's on the top left of your screen, which is like a pin symbol. You got to click on that. So every time the workflow runs, just for testing, it's going to use the same. It's not going to do the API call. It's just going to just give that out as an output. Great. So now we've created the node. We know it's a valid phone number. We know that it has iMessage. Now I want to send this guy a text. So for that, I'm going to use this step, which is the send text workflow. Again, keep in mind, we're doing a post request. We're using generic credential type. We're using bearer auth, and we're using the same API key. If you have multiple workspaces or multiple clients, each one gets their own workflow with their own API key. All right, so now you might wonder, what if I don't know what these URLs are? Well, you can basically go to docs.tuco.ai and it's going to have that. Well, let me pause this because I need to plug in my laptop. All right, so my laptop is charged. Now what we're trying to do, what I was about to say, is you can go to docs.tuco.ai, that's docs.tuco.ai, and if you click on API reference, you can see all of this. Like, I've just have done kind of a lot of heavy lifting for you. And the cool part about this is you can just click on copy page and give that to Claude or ChatGPT, and it can create these N8N JSONs for you. You don't have to click and drag and do all this drama. But I mean, worst comes to worst, it's still nice to know how the whole thing works. All right, perfect. So now again, I know that it's a post request. I'm sending a post request to this API to send a message. I'm going to use this API key because I want to use this specific workspace. And I'm sending a JSON. We went through JSON. And I'm expanding this on GHL. Now, I want to send a lead a message, right? And let's say every time you want it to be dynamic in certain places. So let's say as soon as a lead comes in, you want to say hi, and then you can, again, you can click and drag, right? Now, multiple inputs exist on the left side. So you can kind of use the drop down to kind of expand and collapse. And I'm going to take from the map variable, if you kind of remember that, that was the second step. I'm going to drag it and put it here. And anything that's green inside of N8N is a variable. So every workflow is going to get a new replacement in that specific page. So I want to say something like, hi BG, this is me from Tuco, right? And you got to give it the lead ID. How did we get the lead ID? Well, we just created the lead. So click on create lead. It's going to have the lead ID. Drag and drop it, and it's going to be there. Now, for me, it's already there, so it's cool. And then you have something called the from line ID. I want you to pay attention to this. So if you don't really care, and if you have multiple iPhones within the same workspace, you can just remove this. So you can remove this, copy it here, paste it in the JSON format validator. If it's a valid JSON, this is everything you need in order to send a text. But let's say you have multiple iPhones, and if you have multiple sales guys and you want to have it go out using a specific iPhone, you can go to app.tuco.ai/lines, and once you do that, you're going to see a list of all the phones that you have. And let's say I want to use this phone number to send that text. I can copy the lead ID. Now, the lead ID is not the phone number that you send from. It's not the phone number you send to. It's from which phone do I want to send this message out from. So I'm going to replace this thing in red. So again, keep in mind, red means that N8N is unable to find a replacement for that particular text. So I'm going to remove it. I'm going to still keep the quotes, and then I'm going to validate whether or not this is a good JSON. All right, perfect. It's a good JSON. I'm going to just click outside. I'm going to click on execute step. So for me, it's going to basically say, hi, this is me from Tuco, right? Let's see if it does a good job. All right, so I got a text on my phone number that says, hi, this is BG from Tuco, right? And this is going to be replaced for every lead that comes into your workflow. Great. I'm going to pin this because I don't want the same text again. But this side, this left side is the input, and then right side is the output. So what are all the things that we see here? We're seeing what is the lead ID, when was the message sent, when was it created, all that good stuff. And which phone line did we send it from, which phone line did we send it to, what is the recipient phone, what is the recipient name. You're going to see all that stuff. Great. Now, this is all you need in order to send one text. Well, let's say I want to send this guy a follow-up, in case he doesn't respond. How do I do that? Or if I want to send this guy a link, or if I want to send this guy a voice note, keep in mind there are some hard rules to iMessage that we don't set up, but Apple sets up themselves. So it's something like hard rules of iMessage. No more than 50 new texts a day, right? What is new? It means someone you're contacting for the first ever time. That's new. 50 new texts a day. And then if you send links before they respond, they will not be able to click on it. And one more is basically you can't send voice notes or images or any attachments in the first text. So let's say I text you once, you don't reply, I can send you a voice note as a follow-up, but I can't send you a clickable link until you respond, but I can still send you a voice note if you haven't responded. And that's what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to wait one day and then send him another text, which is probably a voice note, right? So right now we don't have the time to wait one day. So I'm gonna remove this and make it 1 second. And keep in mind, because we have this pinned, it's not gonna, do the same text again. It's just gonna, skip that and then come here. And we're gonna open this because there are some important things that I wanna go through. So everything else is the same, but if you look at the JSON again, I'm clicking on the rectangle with the arrow, and you have the lead ID that you copied from create lead. So you have that here. You can drag and drop. Let's drag and drop it. And then I want you to pay attention to this. Attachment URLs. What the heck is that? Well, it's basically like, I want to send you a voice note. Great. Now, how do I send that? How do I get that URL? Well, you want to go into something like an online voice recorder, and then you can use something like this. You can record it, and then you get an MP3 file. Once you get an MP3 file, head over to app.tuco.ai, click on leads on the left-hand side, and then click on upload audio, right? Now, I already have so many audio files that are just like ready to go. So why don't I take any of this? All right, perfect. It's some random noise, but I have a public URL here. As soon as I upload, so you can upload a new thing by clicking on choose file and uploading it here, but because I already have it, I'm just gonna click on copy, and it needs to be a public URL. So maybe you wanna just go into incognito. All right, perfect, it plays. So I'm gonna come back here, and I'm gonna remove this gray stuff. So if it's green, it means it has the text to send it. If it's red, it means it's missing that text. If it's gray, it means that the previous steps have not executed to kind of like determine which text this is. But I want to hard code this. I want to send the same audio to everybody else. If you're one of those creative guys, you can basically use something like 11 Labs to send a new voice note to everybody, right? I'm going to delete that. I'm going to paste that here. Great. Then I want to pay attention to this. Voice note true. What is that? Well, in Apple, you can basically get these waveforms. If that sort of makes sense, it's like a blue thing. So you want to keep that on. And then I want you to really pay attention to skip if replied. So skip if replied basically means in that period when I was waiting for one day, if you replied, it won't send this text. It'll automatically get sent. But in case I don't reply, it's going to send this voice note. And whenever you send a voice note, you want to have the square brackets, publicly listed MP3 file. You want to keep it under 5 MB. You want to keep it like very short. Voice note true, skip a reply true. In my case, I've previously replied, so I'm just going to remove this, but in your case, you're probably going to have that on. And then from line ID, here I have only one line ID, so I'm not really hugely concerned. So I'm going to remove that. And message, so in case you want to include a message, you can include that. I like to just like send the voice note. And now I'm going to click on unpin because I want to actually send this message to you and show how it works. And instead of waiting for one day, it just like waits 1 second. So I'm going to click on execute step. It's going to, we did the JSON thing. Hold on. Is this a valid JSON? Let's figure out. So again, that's why these tools kind of like help. All right, it's a valid JSON. I think it was the comma. I'm not sure. All right, I think it's gonna go through now. So I think it can't have a trailing comma. You just wanna, like, go to JSON validator and see if you're sending a valid JSON. And as you have it, I have it here. So it's pretty perfect. All right, so we have this gone through. So I'm gonna pin this to you, and then like, again, I want to wait one more day, and then I have the same text, which is something like, hey, you want to replace this. If it's gray or red, you want to replace that. Hey, did you get this? And then this time I'm gonna have skip if reply true, because I'm gonna reply to myself so that it doesn't send the text, and I can show you how that works. I don't need the phone ID because, like, I have only one phone. And then the lead ID, I'm gonna take it from create lead, drag and drop it. Perfect. Click on execute step. If you want to actually do it, you want to unpin it. If you just want to use the previous step, that's totally fine. Unfortunately, I forgot to, hold on. Yeah, let me try it now. It's gonna, like, we can't wait for a day, so I'm just gonna execute step. And here, do you see that? Like, skipped. This contact already replied, so it's not gonna send that text. It's beautiful. It's Tuco. So it's amazing. It just skipped that. Great. So now you've learned completely on how to send, like, a 3-step cadence using N8N and Tuco. Now in this case, let's say you can do 2 things. One, if it doesn't have iMessage, you can send it using an external provider or using something like Twilio. Twilio is a common external provider, or you can use something like Telnix. And the cool part about Tuco is you can actually set it up inside of settings and then fallback. So it's like, fallback is basically when a lead doesn't have iMessage, so you can send a backup text using Twilio or Telnix. If you're using fallback, you don't need to use the check iMessage node. If you're using check iMessage node, you can't use the fallback. I like to just, like, not even text the leads that are not on iMessage, because, like, most of the people in the US have an iPhone, so you should be good. Now, the important part is, how do I receive messages? Because, like, I want to know if someone responded to me, right? So again, this is going to be either or, and there is a setting that you got to set up inside of Tuco. So first thing you're going to do is publish this workflow, right? And you want to go into your Tuco dashboard, click on integrations. So that's app.tuco.ai. On the sidebar, you're going to see the scroll thing. You're going to scroll down, click on integrations. And then inside of, like, right below integrations, you're going to see a tab, and then you're going to click on webhooks. So I'm going to create a webhook, and I'm going to say, webhook is basically how Tuco tells N8N that this happened, right? So I want to know if someone replied to my iMessage. So I'm going to, that's the second thing here, which is, like, receive this. Again, remember, test URL, production URL, N8N loves to confuse us. I'm going to copy the production URL because, like, or for now, I'll just show it to you with the test URL. But in most cases, after you're done testing, you want to switch this URL to the production URL. For now, I'm going to show you the test URL. And then if you're using the test URL, it won't work every time. It just, like, works it when you click on this listen for test event sort of situation. So I'm going to click on listen for test event. Okay, I'm going to copy that. I'm going to put that inside of Tuco. And then you got to, like, you can set up multiple workflows for each event. So I just want to listen when someone responds. So I'm going to click on reply, and I'm going to say reply N8N. And I'm going to click on create. Perfect. Now I can click on test, right? So I'm going to click on test. It's going to send a test event. And right here, you have the output of, like, who replied, what did they reply. This is the guy who replied. This is the line ID they replied to. This is the message that they gave you. sort of a situation. Now, after you're done testing, you want to remove the test URL and you want to replace it with the actual URL, because you want to work, you want to make it work after it goes through as well. Okay, so I'm gonna replace it with the real URL that doesn't have test, and N8N test reply. Click on create. Now you gotta publish this or else you can't receive, right? Once I publish this, now I'm gonna do a sample test reply from my phone to my phone. So I'm gonna do something called test reply. Let's see if that comes in. Now to see that, you gotta go into executions, and sure enough, here I have it. So I just like responded test reply. You open that. So it's like editor is basically like when you're just testing this, and then executions is when like you release it or publish it to the world. And you can see what's happening here. And here it says that who replied, what happened. Well, someone replied. Who's that lead? Well, it's this guy. It's BG from tuco.ai who has responded. And what has he responded? Well, you can basically see the message. And like I said, I responded test reply. It's come in here, right? Perfect. So I get that. And then I can basically like copy the lead ID from here. Again, drag and drop it, which is... Well, I probably need to... I can actually copy the real payload from this. So how I'm going to do that is I'm going to go into executions, not evaluations, executions. I'm going to click on this, and here you see a clipboard. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to come back into the editor. I'm going to click on edit. Right next to the pin icon, there's an edit icon. And then I'm going to pin that here. And now I can basically drag and drop the lead ID. So where's the lead ID? Here's the lead ID. Drag and drop it. I see the phone, I see the lead ID, I see the reply text. And in case I send an attachment URL, I can also see the attachment URL here. And now you can basically like reply back to them. So you want to do something like an AI bot, you can do that. And then you want to copy the send step 1 and then drag it and then put that thing here, and you basically have the lead ID, so you replace that. Again, red means no, and then the message again would be basically the reply that you want to give them, right? Now you can take this one step ahead with Tuco, because one of the other things that we do is something called an AI agent. So again, going back into Tuco sidebar, you can set up an AI agent. So what you can do is basically you can say something like, hey, if this guy asks me something about like this thing, reply in this way. So there are basically 3 modes. One is called manual. If you're using manual, you want to set up the webhook to just reply like we did. But let's say you're using Copilot, you want to set up the event to AI draft, right? So I'm gonna basically go in here and copy this production URL and copy that here. So that way you get kind of like an AI draft like we show here on what you need to respond back in. Now, I didn't fully show you how to set up the AI agent, so let's do that here. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves. So 3 modes within tuco.ai. You can either set manual, in which case you have to listen for the reply webhook and set it up there. Or you can do Copilot, in which case you have to listen for the other thing. And you got to give at least one website or one custom answer. So you can give it a common website that is available. Or you can basically, we already have this URL, or you can give it like, what are your business hours? And then we work 6:30 to 14:30 EST, right? So if you're using manual, just to kind of like reiterate, if you have this thing in manual, then the webhook that you're setting inside of settings and also inside of integrations, needs to be listening for reply. But if you're using AI draft, you need to be listening for this AI draft. Pretty simple. And you set that up here, you get the response, and once you like it, again, you copy the send step and paste it and reply. You can either approve and send it, or you can basically link that thing here. Execute previous nodes. Hold on. So this is the, this is the draft that it sort of generated. Again, I'm gonna make this full screen, and I'm gonna keep this as the message, and then like lead ID. Do I have the lead ID here? Where do I have it? There I have it. And then you can, if you have one line, you don't need to give the from line ID, but then you want to reply from the same line ID that we sent from. So make sure that's the same here on whichever lead that came in through. And that's pretty much it. This is how you basically use, so it's either or. So if you're using the manual, mode, you got to listen for reply. If you're using the AI draft, you got to listen to AI draft. And then you can also like play around with it. So let's say you want to send an email every time this guy doesn't have iMessage. So you got to click on false, and then you can basically say something like email, and then like send an email to someone. Or let's say you want to notify your team every time a reply comes in and you want them to manually respond. You can basically click on this, respond. I think it's a pretty good tutorial on how to get started with Tuco AI. Now, other things is like, let's say worst comes worst, the iMessage fails. You can listen for that and get notified for that. If you want to search for a lead, you can kind of search for a lead. If you want to get the line ID and you don't have the patience to go into the Tuco dashboard, you can also do that. And then let's say you want to check, this is a cool thing. So if you want to check for all the replies that are from a specific lead, you can also give that. The reply webhook is gonna have also like the past messages, like if you look at it here. So you can give that to your own AI model and also play around with that. But I think this should give you a good idea on how to use Tuco AI.